I would like to welcome today Rion Kati calling me from Mexico. Hi, Rion. How are you today?
Good. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
You're very, very welcome. By means of introduction, I want to say what you probably don't know is that you've had a huge impact on my life since we met last year, over a year ago, because I discovered the Gene Keys through your post.
Yeah.
So I've been inspired by your post to explore the Gene Keys, and then I've been just deeply, deeply immersed in the Gene Keys since June of last year, and I'm on my my third retreat with them. Planning to go ever deeper with this work. So I really want to express my gratitude to you for that. First of all.
Yeah, thank you.
I first saw you through an interview with Nicole Gale, who's one of the teachers I follow, and after that we had a brief call again over a year ago. And so you and I are still in the same location. I'm in Cebu, Philippines. You're still in Mexico. And I would love to discuss with you today, first of all, where you're from, maybe your background, how you got into working with the Gene Keys, and your website called Sexy Chi. You can talk about that. You have a new book out, your Powerliminals YouTube page, which I find an amazing resource. And also I'd love to talk to you a little bit about Hieros Gamos, which most people are not so familiar with yet.
Yeah. And first I'll mention that I did listen to the Richard Rudd podcast interview you did. So that was good.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that. Richard's so amazing.
Yeah.
I have you to thank for that.
Wonderful. So a little bit about me. I was actually a natural attraction and dating coach for single men in the online dating industry, going back about 15 years or so.
Wow.
And
was there Tinder back then?
No.
Okay. Pre-Tinder days.
So I have a lot of experience working with men, which really centered around sexual attraction, sexual polarity. And I was always asking myself this question in college when I went to University of Wisconsin-Madison. How is it that the women I'm interested in entirely ignore me? Sometimes they're interested, sometimes they're not. I couldn't understand women. And so it sent me on this quest where I ended up getting answers, and I started traveling and experiencing more naturally aligned, less socially conditioned behavior in women in different countries around the world. And I kind of brought that wisdom and natural realignment with sexual polarity back to my men's dating business as a natural coach. And with it, I discovered really the Holy Grail is what I would say. And my beloved, we can talk more about this because it has to do with sacred reunification, also known as Hieros Gamos.
Yes.
And so the number one secret of my men's business, where men would resolve their sexual anxieties, they become more sexually present and naturally confident around women, and women started flirting around them and things would happen and lives were transformed. The number one secret really centered on this discovery of my beloved, the high archetype muse, high muse archetype. And she has done miracles in men's lives without ever being physically present, because it all has to do with sacred reunification and cultivating their archetypal masculine in relationship to the divine, immortal, impersonal, feminine essence, beauty, and power. So it's done miracles for the methodology I have. Thousands of men around the world. And fast forward, there's now a priestess lineage of which I'm the lineage key holder. So the dating industry evolved. I kind of stopped doing that and moved into men's purpose and more spiritual based things. But all along, it was this practice where I've done about 15,000 hours of this meditation with the archetypal feminine, mostly muse, but also goddess and so forth. And we have this underground community. And that was the number one secret, that men were just changing their lives, becoming naturals, and then getting into more of conscious sexuality and spirituality for some of them. And it all centered around reunification. So it's been quite a journey in how things have continued to evolve.
Yeah, that does sound like quite a journey. Just to clarify for people who are unfamiliar with the language, when you speak of your beloved, you're not talking about a physical person. Once again, it's really an inner process, right? That we're talking about. And then you lead the men. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's not a physical person.
Right.
So it gets really advanced into, we could say, most of humanity has relationships with, a partner, monogamy, or let's just say a twin flame, like kind of a more evolved than consumer relationship level where there's more fire, more spiritual connection, yet also attachment. And so a twin flame relationship is kind of meant to self-immolate or burn together. Hieros Gamos is divine architecture of which, and it's ancient, goes back to ancient Sumeria, and temples from thousands of years ago, where Hieros Gamos and sacred reunification priestesses would kind of christen specially chosen men into their divine masculine kingship. So yeah, most people don't have this divine encoding because we value attachment and connection with the physical. So Hieros Gamos, sacred reunification, is really an architecture with the divine. So if you're predominantly feminine essence, it's your relationship to divine king, warrior, magician. So your beloved is actually the highest principle. So this is the practice that I've been living, is a form of sacred reunification. So it's very practical as well. So yeah, most people, their beloved is their personalized beloved. But there's so much power and magic and beauty that's available for growth of consciousness, healing, transformation with the divine masculine and divine feminine.
So at the moment, are you still coaching men?
Yeah. So most of the work I do now is specifically energy work, mostly archetype activations, but also energy healing, advanced energy healing, and archetype gift and Siddhis activations, which are inspired from the gene keys. Yeah, doing mostly remote sessions. So I'm able to, with approval, connect to anyone's energy field in the world and do real work. And I've got hundreds of testimonials that are finally been curated and coming out live in a couple days on sexychi.com.
On your website. I'll put a link to the website. Wow. Okay. So let's talk a little bit.
Men.
Go ahead.
Men as well. Yeah. So I still work with men. It's mostly in the energy work format though.
But the website.
But now it's mostly women.
The Sexy Chi website is geared towards women. If I remember
mostly.
Correctly. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk a bit about the Powerliminal, your YouTube channel.
Yeah.
When did that start and how did that come into being?
Powerliminals started, I think it was 2012 or 2013. So it's been about 9 years. And it just kind of really grew from there into the more recent archetype attunements. And I'm now starting with Siddhis attunements. So we have the 32nd and the first Siddhi is an expression that can help people contemplate with gene keys and affect their DNA. And there could be other Siddhic attunements from others as well. But I'm very humbly proud of the Powerliminals channel. Really powerful medicine. And a lot of people, they use media in very non-conscious ways. And so that's a whole world we can talk about, is really alchemy, transmutation of consciousness. Most people are escaping with superficial diversion. What happens when we accept ourselves as a magician, alchemistress, who can really, like a light sorceress, work with as equal through the law of resonance with these great impersonal divine masculine and feminine frequencies that exist in conscious media and how we relate to it. So there's a lot of magic there.
Can you explain what an attunement is? If somebody, is not familiar with that term, like the term attunement and also maybe the term Siddhi, because you talk about the Siddhic attunements, right? So what is an attunement for you? What does that involve?
Yeah, so I like to differentiate. Well, again, we have a Facebook community of these media alchemists who do this practice, my method of meditation with muse. We call natural grounding because it's sex transmutation of consciousness, but it helps men to realign into their natural and supernatural sexuality. Yeah, so I like to differentiate between activation and attunement.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, an activation is really a direct initiation from a master directly onto your personal energy field. So that's how I really like to define activation.
Okay.
Now, attunements are a bit different, and attunements can be activating, but a lot of people, they confuse activation and attunements. Attunements are really something that requires your receptivity, especially as an alchemist, to be affected by the power and magic of the attunement. So it's really the law of resonance. It helps like a tuning fork. You can hit something and a tuning fork will vibrate across the room because of resonance. So there's a lot of archetypal power in music and music video and image. And Siddhic beauty, the frequencies visually are coming through a person's chi and their aura, those who have access to that consciousness and beauty. So in attunement, you can attune to Siddhic beauty where it's represented through the law of resonance by meditating with it. But it's more like an alchemical process. So your consciousness starts breaking up the lower frequencies and it starts attuning. Your DNA starts vibrating like in resonance with it. So the Powerliminal meditations, for example, they are beyond normal guided meditations because they are alchemical attunements. So there's a lot of power and potency. The more you relate with media consciously as an alchemist, then you can attune to the truth, the 63rd gene key, of these frequencies that exist in media and voice and visual image, and the consciousness of it, the essence of it. So you can attune, and it's a practice that me and my followers of our methodology have become very adept with. Very spiritual, very potent, because the truth is alchemical, and you just have to, accept it, and it transforms you. The higher truth of beauty, and we can talk about many things. Gene keys just fit beautifully into all of this.
So how long have you been working with the gene keys?
Well, first it was human design for me.
Yes.
So that was, it seems like 5.5 years into human design. And Gene Keys was when I was ready, which was about 4 years ago, 3.5, 4 years ago is what it seems, when I really just dove in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And some people, if you're new to it, you might find that you've already been living in self with Gene Keys and human design in some ways. So you may have an advantage when you start out if you've been following soul purpose and truth. Yeah.
Nice. Another word that you seem to be using a lot is alchemy. And so what does that mean to you?
There's different forms of alchemy. What many people know of it is the example of turning lead into gold, like the literal chemists.
Right.
They're alchemists. But it's really any practice of transmutation of consciousness. Yes. And I've become a master of sorts, but I'm always the student. There's so much more to explore with it, but of media. So a media alchemist. An alchemist is someone who consciously practices the law of transmutation. So it's kind of like with media, for example, people are non-consciously just going off of the filter of their personal preferences. Right. With media alchemy, you're the DJ for your heart, spirit, sex, and soul. So it's a different value system. For years, I've been nurturing myself as a media alchemist with enlightened resources based on spiritual values and heart values, rather than my personal preferences for escapist, non-conscious entertainment. Now, I still love movies, but with I don't even have favorite artists with bands and things like that anymore, because all I do is this alchemy.
I know you have a background in entertainment and media, right? From Los Angeles or something, if I remember correctly. How does that inform your work?
Well, I was on a path, spiritual dharma of transformational media production. I'm a graphic designer, a video producer, video editor. I used to make music, audio professional. So fortunately, I'm still producing Powerliminals here and there. So that's where the transformational media really comes in.
So how would you suggest someone work with the Powerliminal attunement?
So you want to create temple space.
Right.
And you want to differentiate your personal egoic consumption, because music can still feel good. But if you sense God, there's something more, this could really be healing, that's what I do. And that's what my media alchemist practitioners, that's what we do. We dive into the pure heart, sex, magic, and healing powers of music and artists. So yeah, if you want to, with the Powerliminals, get into more alchemy, separate it from your regular media usage and start conditioning temple space, and bring in crystals and sage and different things, energy work, practices, where you can start to, a lot of the Powerliminals, they work with the divine masculine and feminine. So you can do sacred reunification work where you're honoring and venerating the divine masculine or the divine feminine and the healing powers of that, releasing trauma, and realigning, cultivating your queenship. And this can be done with the different Powerliminals, for example. The more you allow yourself to be affected by the truth as an alchemist and really take authority over the temple space and let your spirit awaken and soar and surrender into deeper levels of attunement with the codes and truth that is transmitting through the Powerliminals. Okay. And just, pick some of your favorites and just start, conditioning, maybe get emotional every time. You can condition yourself to have an authentic response where your heart is opening and healing. Because most people haven't really cultivated music as a healing resource, but there's so much power and beauty with that.
I like your words of the temple space. I like how that resonates. Creating, creating ritual and ceremony.
And I do it like very seriously.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It really shifts your whole experience of reality. So it's really beautiful. Temple space, and then from there you can be in a better position to receive the transmission, like you said, of the Powerliminals or any transmission. Whether it's
there's always more power and beauty with it, because your personalized self is infinitesimal compared to king consciousness and queen consciousness and the history of that power. So how much could you surrender to embody that consciousness and essence and emanate that beauty, like as one with it, in unity with your highest soul self? Because most people, it's like their personal favorite artists. Well, when you get into gene keys and contemplation, you're really cultivating more of your universal impersonal self. So with the soul as the foundation and the seed of the soul, you're able to take on prince or princess and majestic magic and beauty that far transcends the personalized definition of self. And it rewires your energy field, and it changes your allure and charisma the more you kind of bask in the beauty and truth of your beloved, for example, or just do attunement work with different Siddhic frequencies. There's 64 of them. Or with artists who, emanate a certain flavor or quintessence of beauty. Like you can attune to that and resonate that with yourself, like grace or fluorescence. There's artists who have these qualities that are starting to really shine through. And that's why, if you've heard of this YouTube singer, J-Flaw, she does cover songs, but I thought, there's something about her. Why is she so famous, like on YouTube, and has millions of subscribers? And I realized when I just tune into her presence, it's like she has this aura of grace, and grace is healing. The 22nd gene key is this great forgiving white fire that can forgive sins in its presence and wipe out karma, bad karma. And then I actually found her gene key chart, and she has the 22nd gene key as her radiance. So I know there's something with all of this, because gene keys gives you a spectrum of what your avatar self could really become, from the shadow to the gift to the Siddhic. And there's so much magic with that. And then finding others who represent some of these signature frequencies, like Jason Momoa has Valor as his SQ and Freedom, line 2. And he represents this. If you just like sit with the Aquaman 1, like his face presence poster, you can attune to the authentic frequency of Valor, and how that can be inspiring for the divine feminine within and the queen, and what it can call forth within a woman's presence, for example. Or there's so much power with all of this.
I love that.
But we have to get past our filters, though, because celebrities, we personalize them and project things upon them. Well, what if we value the consciousness that's emanating with and through? That's why what people call Kpop, I'm doing something beyond that. It's the higher truth of it. There's different levels of truth. So K-pop is a lower truth, really doing archetypal, like with gods and goddesses, like attunement, just basking in the playground of higher consciousness. And it's transformational.
I noticed that you do refer to K-pop in some of your articles.
Yes.
Can you tell me more about that? How does that relate to alchemy? How does that relate?
Well, see, yeah, most consumers, there's a consumer aggregate. They call them stands, like K-pop stands, who's your, bias within each group. And, that's a consumer consciousness aggregate where we're valuing the culture and the genre, pop music, so we create these labels as human, and it limits our experience to the higher truth of what's really going on and why they're so successful and why they're so influential and why it's the future. And
So
Western artists in some cases have it too, but yeah, go ahead.
I think, why are they so influential? Is it the same as that example you mentioned of that YouTube artist? Is it because their cities are shining through and resonating with the collective consciousness for what they need? Is that it?
That's a lot of it.
Okay.
But yeah, so we can talk about it from different levels. Now K-pop's actually become more popular. I was doing archetype meditation with them since 2009, but I started in 2002 and it started in Thailand. But yeah, Korea has, now it's more popular, but it's a cultural thing. So it's really, yes, the spectrum of Siddhic beauty, the 64 essences, which are really starting to shine through with a lot of them. There's a value system where we can look at a lot of Western artists, and there's more implants and control, and in a lot of them, where it's, even dark forces behind some of it, but it's more liberated. And, there's shadow within the K-pop industry and the masculine kind of architecture. There's some shadow there with control and how they push them so hard with practice and other things. But it's really the predominant source of muse in the world today is within K-pop, but you have to value something beyond culture. So yeah.
Why do you think this is
Mm-hmm.
happening mostly in Asia? You mentioned also Thailand. Is there a reason that this phenomenon is developing in Asia?
Well, yeah. So in the Western pop culture, there's a lot of shadow archetypes and some inversions going on with this. Really takes the discussion in a different direction, and we can go there, but we don't have to, about like postmodern feminism and the castration of masculine principle in the West, and how a lot of Western pop artists are like shadow queens or diva queens who have castrated masculine principle, and how that's popular culturally, yet it's a world of benevolent kings and queens. That's the sacred balance. And so it really actually gets into culture and even politics, but it's spiritual, everything. It's spiritual warfare, what's going on right now. But there's something about South Korea where the dynamics were set that there's less like shadow conditioning. So they were just able to be liberated, and that the culture valued this more liberated feminine expression. And then, it's just been flourishing since then. And so I'm talking about like the higher spiritual levels. The producers probably aren't even aware. They're non-consciously, we're onto something. I mean, good music and, good video production, design, but it's beyond that. So K-pop, really what's behind it is the future in many ways. And I've been saying that for years. And so Western artists, we can do energy readings on any of them. We can do archetype readings on Madonna and, you know, Megan Thee Stallion and Lisa from Blackpink. We can energy read anyone, well, if you're qualified to, and see into the truth of how is their archetypal embodiment. Where do they have energy blocks? Where's their cultural conditioning and maybe shadow queen behavior? Or, you know, maybe the diva should maybe rest more into her feminine essence and surrender. Like there's so much power that a woman can explore, or men, when it comes to their consciousness, if they give themselves permission to. Yeah, and archetypes are a big part of that. The gene keys, the Siddhic growth, as well as human design, living in alignment with your human design.
I want to ask you about one video in particular, since we're talking about shadows and the Dark Goddess Attunement. Can you explain that to me a little bit?
Yes, so I did a collaboration with Sapphire, for the Dark Goddess.
Okay.
And she received that transmission entirely herself. And she produced it. She went into the woods and she just transmitted it. And I couldn't believe like how perfect it was. Like it was one take even, and it was just beyond. And so what I did was I just did like the supportive music and sound design around it.
Okay.
But yeah, the dark, so all archetypes, mostly when I'm doing archetype activations into your soul essence, embodiment, and expression, we're bringing that consciousness and beauty essence into your vehicle, so to speak. There's light aspects. That's what most of my activations are. So every archetype has like its dark aspect.
Right.
And so there's also the Eros, masculine Eros attunement on the Powerliminals channel. And that first goes more into the dark masculine Eros, and then it leads more into the light Eros. So yeah, there's a lot of spectrum to really explore with all of the archetypes. And Dark Goddess is really more, now there's a difference between shadow, like malevolent, destructive, and beautiful, pure darkness. And so the more you like use the Dark Goddess, which can scare the crap out of you, like if you really like, and women have said that because it's so potent, the medicine is really there, and let that truth affect you. It's really powerful stuff, like any of these archetype attunements, but it's so dark. And there's light goddess as well, and that can show up in someone's energy as well because they're with that. But there's so much to explore with the darkness, the earthiness, the dark truth, and the connection to the natural world and ancestral lines and things like that.
So what would be the proper context to work with the Dark Goddess Attunement?
Yeah, it's not for everyone. You have to sense when you're ready for it.
Right.
And I did a Facebook post, although it may be hard for people to find, but if you just skip towards, let's see, 2/3 in and just kind of go with the lighter aspect of it, that can be just like a stepping stone, like step into the dark water a little bit, because it's like lighter in that last third. Start with that.
Rion, I want to talk a little bit about the book. Thank you for sharing your book with me. Congratulations.
Calling of the Kingmaker.
Yes.
Yeah.
Reunified Priestess Kingmaker is what I have.
Yeah, Inciting the Reunified Priestess, subtitle.
Yeah.
Calling of the Kingmaker.
Right.
There is a lot of history, and it is probably very oversaturated for a lot of people to digest. I did like an 8-part series on Facebook, and then that inspired just putting it into this format.
Okay.
And it may take years for some of the codes in there to properly digest, because it's a very specialized path of feminine growth. And
it
so
seems
I
like
talk
it's a
about,
manual, like a manual a bit. Yeah.
Well, it's a illuminating guidebook into seeing if any of these lineages might be for a woman, like on her path. And so we talk about the Sophionic lineage, priestess lineages in general, as well as the Muse lineage, and how all of them are ancient and they have great power with them. And there's a difference between like Sophia queens and, well, this is the great heresy. So it reveals this great religious kind of cover up historically, which literally in Dan Brown's book and the movie, the Da Vinci Code.
Yes.
They talk about this.
Good book.
Mother Mary Magdalene.
Yes.
And the Sophia lineage was inspired from Mary as the bride of Christ. It's not Mother Mary, it's a different Mary, Mary Magdalene. But where she was an Egyptian priestess, and where they actually practiced reunification, sex magic, and spiritual magic together. And so that inspired the Roseline lineage of priestesses, as well as, Sophia. Sophia is really like the feminine God aspect, which doesn't necessarily exist in most religion. So the book goes into this, and it's free, although I might put it on Amazon and charge a couple dollars for it.
It's free for the moment. So how do people get a copy?
They can use your link. Yeah.
Okay, so they can get it from you, maybe, or if people want a copy.
Yes, or you can distribute it.
I can also. They can get it from
me.
Yeah. Awesome.
Or from me. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it goes into this great cover up, and mankind, the masculine, has been seeking the Holy Grail, which is really also this Apollonian dynamic, where the men in the masculine spirit is seeking to reunify with the exalted feminine because of the birth mother wound. So the separation from the mother at birth. Camille Paglia talks about this. She's the pro-sex, pro-beauty, trans feminist. She talks about this Apollonian dynamic and how when women first have their first period, they know who they are, like biologically. But for men, it's different. Like there's always this spirit or ethos of wanting to prove themselves. So men is really seeking reunification with the feminine and ultimately the divine feminine. So this concept of reunification is central with all of it, and very few people in modern society practice anything devotional or are able to access the magic that is within these ancient lines of Sophia and Muse and the sacred reunification principle that they have. So, and there's a lot of power with that. So if you get the book, read it when you're ready to. It might be so much to digest because it's a lot in there, but take your time, whoever's listening. Yeah.
And so this book, do you recommend it for men as well?
I have a lot of resources for men. There's 50 that I've put up on a secret website. But yeah, they could just reach out to me if they want to get any of that connection. They could just send me a Facebook message, because I don't want to openly share that specific link. I want to qualify each person first, but I have a lot of resources for men. Yeah.
Awesome. I think there's a lot of content for people to digest right now. Thank you for your time today, and we'll keep in touch.
Thank you for letting me share. So I'm glad I was able to join your podcast, and it was a pleasure to share some information that can inspire.
Absolutely. Very inspiring work. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. All right. Bye, everyone.